The stadium thundered with cheers as students tossed their caps into the air. In the corner, away from the crowd, sat Eva Lancaster, 22, paralyzed since a car accident. Her wheelchair gleamed under the sun, but her eyes dimmed. No one came to celebrate. As laughter echoed, a man approached. Daniel Harris, 39, a single dad with his young daughter. He stopped, smiled, and held out his hand. "Stay with us. This touching story will move your heart." Daniel Harris had driven 3 hours to attend his cousin's graduation, bringing his 11-year-old daughter Lily, who was excited about visiting a real college campus. The ceremony had been everything graduation ceremonies typically were. Long speeches about bright futures, proud families cheering, and the traditional cap-tossing finale that marked the transition from student life to whatever came next. As families rushed onto the field to embrace their graduates, Daniel scanned the crowd for his cousin while Lily bounced beside him, overwhelmed by the energy and emotion. That's when he noticed her, sitting alone in her wheelchair at the far edge of the celebration area, physically present, but somehow separate from the joy filling the stadium. Eva Lancaster held her diploma in her lap, the leather folder pristine and untouched by congratulatory hugs. She watched the reunion scenes with an expression mixing longing with resignation, as though she had learned not to expect inclusion in moments like these. "Dad, look at that girl over there," Lily said, tugging Daniel's sleeve. "She looks really sad. She's all alone, and everyone else has family with them." Daniel followed his daughter's gaze and felt his heart constrict. Eva was dressed in the same cap and gown as every other graduate, had presumably worked just as hard for her degree, yet she sat isolated in the middle of a crowd designed to honor exactly what she had accomplished. "Can we talk to her, Dad?" Lily asked with compassionate instinct. "Maybe she needs some friends today." Daniel hesitated, weighing the social dynamics of approaching a stranger during what should have been one of the most significant moments of her life. But looking at Eva's expression, the careful composure that couldn't quite hide her disappointment, he realized that the risk of awkwardness was less important than the possibility of connection. They walked across the grass until they reached Eva's position. Daniel knelt to bring himself to her eye level, extending his hand in universal gesture of recognition and respect. "Congratulations on your graduation," Daniel said gently. "This is a huge accomplishment, and no one should have to celebrate something this important alone." Eva looked up with surprise that quickly transformed into gratitude, her eyes brightening for the first time that afternoon, as she realized someone had not only noticed her achievement, but considered it worth acknowledging. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying emotion that had been building throughout a ceremony where she had been surrounded by celebration, but touched by none of it. Lily stepped forward with characteristic directness. "I'm Lily, and this is my dad, Daniel. We think you're really smart for finishing college. Would you like to get ice cream with us?" Eva's smile was genuine, the first real happiness she had felt all day. "I'd like that very much." As they walked toward the parking lot together, Eva found herself between Daniel and Lily, no longer isolated but included in their small celebration. The loneliness that had marked her graduation day was already beginning to fade, replaced by something she had almost forgotten was possible: the simple joy of being welcomed by people who saw her as someone worth knowing. "What did you study?" Lily asked with endless curiosity. "Art therapy," Eva replied, her voice growing stronger. "I want to help people express themselves when words aren't enough. So." Daniel smiled at her answer, understanding that sometimes the people best equipped to help others heal were those who had done the hardest work of healing themselves. Daniel and Lily's invitation to join them for lunch felt natural, though Eva hadn't shared a meal with new friends in longer than she could remember. They chose Mel's Diner near campus, a local institution that had been feeding students and families for decades. Lily immediately launched into enthusiastic questions about college life, asking Eva about dorm rooms, professors, and whether students really stayed up all night studying like in movies. Her chatter filled potential awkwardness, creating warm atmosphere where conversation could develop naturally. Eva found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in months, responding to Lily's infectious curiosity with stories about campus life she realized she had enjoyed more than she admitted. The child's enthusiasm reminded her of positive aspects of her college experience that had been overshadowed by social isolation and accessibility challenges. As Lily became absorbed in coloring the kids' menu, Daniel and Eva began sharing more personal details. The conversation developed the depth that sometimes emerges between strangers who recognize something familiar in each other's experiences. Eva spoke hesitantly about her father, Richard Lancaster, whose response to her accident 3 years earlier had been to throw himself deeper into running his technology company. "He gives me everything I could need materially," she explained, her voice carrying complicated mixture of gratitude and disappointment. "The best medical care, adaptive technology, a beautiful apartment, but he can't seem to give me himself." Daniel understood that loneliness, having experienced his own version after his wife Sarah died when Lily was 8. "I know what it's like to feel alone even when someone cares about you," he said quietly. "After Sarah passed, I threw myself into work too, thinking providing for Lily was the same as being present for her." "What changed?" Eva asked. "Lily did," Daniel replied, glancing at his daughter carefully coloring. "She told me one day that she missed having a dad who smiled, not just someone who bought groceries and helped with homework. That's when I realized surviving wasn't the same as living." Churkumam. Their conversation revealed parallel struggles. Eva learning to navigate a world not designed for wheelchairs while dealing with a father who had become overprotective and emotionally distant. Daniel learning to be both parents to a grieving child while processing his own loss. But they discovered connections too. Both were readers who found escape in books. Both had developed appreciation for small moments of beauty. Both understood that resilience was built day by day rather than possessed or lacked. Eva began visiting regularly over following weeks, initially for Sunday dinners Daniel prepared in their modest kitchen, but gradually for ordinary activities she had been missing. She helped Lily with art projects, read stories in voices that made characters come alive, discovered she enjoyed teaching someone else skills her education had provided. The three of them developed routines that felt natural. Grocery shopping together, cooking dinner as a team, sharing quiet conversations after Lily went to bed. These domestic moments created intimacy based on shared values rather than circumstances. "You know what I love about being here?" Eva asked one evening while helping Lily build a blanket fort. "I'm not the CEO's disabled daughter or the girl in the wheelchair. I'm just Eva, and that's enough." Daniel understood exactly what she meant about the relief of authenticity. "Lily and I don't have much, but what we have is honest. No masks, no games, just us trying to take care of each other." Eva found herself looking forward to these visits more than anything else in her week. The Lancaster family fortune had provided every material comfort, but it couldn't purchase the warmth that filled Daniel's small living room when they shared homemade pizza and Lily's endless chatter about school friends and art projects. For the first time since her accident, Eva felt genuinely useful rather than just accommodated. Daniel asked her opinion about Lily's homework, trusted her to help make important decisions about their small family routines, treated her as an equal partner in caring for a child they both loved. "I never thought I'd be good with kids," Eva admitted one evening after successfully helping Lily through a mathematics meltdown. "You're natural at it," Daniel replied, watching his daughter explain her newly understood homework to her stuffed animals. "You listen to what she actually needs instead of just what she says she wants." The growing attraction between Daniel and Eva became harder to ignore as they shared intimate moments, but both were careful not to complicate relationships that had become precious to all three of them. Keep watching, because when Eva's father finds out about their growing friendship, their fragile peace will be tested in ways none of them expected. Richard Lancaster's discovery came through the security detail that monitored Eva's activities with discreet surveillance. Wealthy parents used to maintain awareness without appearing to violate independence. Learning Eva had been spending time with a widowed mechanic and his daughter, his reaction was immediate and decisive. The confrontation erupted when Richard arrived unannounced at Daniel's duplex, his expensive sedan conspicuous in a neighborhood where residents drove older cars and worked hourly jobs. His entrance was like a corporate takeover. He assessed the small living room with calculating gaze, his presence filling the space with tension that made Lily retreat to her bedroom. "This ends now," Richard declared without preamble, his voice carrying authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned implementation of his decisions. "I don't know what your game is, Harris, but my daughter won't be exploited by someone who sees her as a path to financial security." Daniel's response was calm despite the accusation. "Mr. Lancaster, I understand you're concerned about Eva, but you're wrong about my motives. I don't need your daughter's money. She's become part of our family because we care about her as a person. Eva wheeled into the living room with expression mixing embarrassment with determination to defend relationships that had become precious. Dad, you never showed up for my graduation. You haven't had dinner with me in 6 months. You send assistants to my medical appointments and hire drivers instead of spending time with me. Daniel and Lily were there when I needed someone to celebrate with me. Richard's anger intensified. They're using your loneliness against you, Eva. This man sees dollar signs when he looks at you, not whatever friendship you think you found. The threat was delivered with precision Richard applied to business negotiations. If this inappropriate relationship continues, Harris, you'll find yourself facing legal challenges that will destroy whatever financial stability you've built for your daughter. I have resources you can't imagine in attorneys who specialize in protecting my family's interests. Daniel felt the weight settling over his household like storm clouds. Richard had power to make employment difficult, housing problematic, legal expenses impossible on a mechanic's salary. Walking away from Eva would protect Lily from consequences affecting her entire future. As Daniel prepared to make the sacrifice responsible parenting seemed to require, Lily appeared in the doorway with moral clarity children sometimes possess when adults become lost in calculations, ignoring fundamental questions. Dad, she said quietly, her voice cutting through adult anger. You always told me that love means staying with people when they need you, even when it's hard. Are you going to leave Eva now when her dad is being mean to her? The question challenged everything Daniel had taught about loyalty, courage, and the difference between doing what was safe and what was right. Lily's words forced him to confront the gap between principles he wanted to instill and compromises he was prepared to make when those principles required sacrifice. Eva watched this exchange with growing understanding that relationships she had found were being tested by forces having nothing to do with genuine affection and everything to do with her father's inability to distinguish between protection and control. You're right to be concerned about Eva, Daniel said finally, his voice steady. She deserves someone who will put her happiness first. But you're wrong about what that looks like. It doesn't look like isolation to keep her safe from disappointment. It looks like trusting her to choose people who value her for who she is, not what she has. Richard's expression shifted as he processed words that challenged his fundamental assumptions about protecting people he loved. For 3 years, he had operated from fear that Eva would be hurt again, but he was beginning to understand that his protection had become another form of imprisonment. She's my daughter, Richard said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. Yes, she is, Daniel agreed, and she's strong enough to make her own decisions about who deserves to be part of her life. The question is whether you trust the person you raised, or whether you're going to spend the rest of your life making her choices for her. Eva looked between the two men, recognizing that this moment would define not just their immediate future, but the kind of relationships she would be allowed to have for the rest of her life. Her voice was quiet but steady when she spoke. I may be in this wheelchair, Dad, but I still get to choose who I love and who I trust with my heart. Eva's words hung in the air with authority that surprised everyone, including herself. She positioned her wheelchair directly between Daniel and Richard, her posture radiating determination, forged through years of overcoming challenges her father had tried to shield her from experiencing. You've spent 3 years trying to control every aspect of my life because you're afraid of what might happen if I make my own decisions. She continued, her voice growing stronger. But the worst thing isn't getting hurt by people who care about me. It's living isolated from authentic relationships because you decided they were too dangerous. Richard's expression cycled through anger, disbelief, and something approaching recognition. For the first time since her accident, he was seeing Eva not as a problem to be managed, but as an adult woman whose strength had been forged through challenges he had tried to prevent. I only wanted to protect you, Richard said, his voice losing corporate authority as he struggled with emotions quarterly reports had never prepared him to navigate. After the accident, I couldn't bear the thought of you being hurt again, but I see now that I was trying to protect you from living, not just from pain. The breakthrough came gradually, measured in small gestures rather than dramatic declarations. Richard began joining Sunday dinners, initially awkward, but slowly learning to engage in ordinary conversation that builds relationships rather than managing them. He discovered Daniel's questions about his work came from genuine curiosity, that Lily's chatter was simply how children shared their world with trusted adults. Eva watched her father navigate these social dynamics with the same determination he applied to business challenges, learning to listen more than he spoke, to ask about others' experiences rather than just reporting accomplishments. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete, but it was genuine. 3 months later, they gathered at Washington Elementary for Lily's starring role in the fourth-grade production of Charlotte's Web. Richard Lancaster, whose name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings, sat between a single father who worked with his hands and a daughter whose wheelchair had taught her more about strength than his money ever could. Lily's performance was enthusiastic rather than polished, her memorized lines delivered with earnest conviction that made elementary school plays simultaneously painful and precious. But the applause came from people whose presence represented something more valuable than critical assessment. "She's remarkable," Richard whispered to Daniel during intermission, watching Lily help younger students backstage. "You've raised someone who sees the best in everyone." "That's what Eva taught her," Daniel replied. Understanding his daughter's capacity for inclusion had been expanded through friendship with someone whose experience of exclusion had made her sensitive to others who might feel left out. She learned kindness isn't something you save for special occasions. It's how you treat people every day. After the performance, they gathered at Daniel's house for celebration that had become tradition. Homemade cake, stories about the evening, comfortable conversation that marked families who had chosen each other. Eva served cake while Daniel made coffee, and Richard attempted to help wash dishes with inexpert enthusiasm of someone learning domestic skills his wealth had previously made unnecessary. "You know what I realized tonight?" Eva said as they settled in the living room, her voice carrying contentment missing from her life for years. "I spent so much time feeling sorry for myself about what I lost in the accident that I almost missed finding what I was meant to have instead." The evening ended with hugs that bridged differences in age, background, and physical ability. Connections built through shared meals, honest conversations, and gradual recognition that families could be created through choice rather than inherited through circumstance. Richard's transformation continued as he learned to balance his protective instincts with respect for Eva's autonomy. He began attending her art therapy sessions, not as overseer, but as someone genuinely interested in work that brought her satisfaction. He discovered that his daughter possessed wisdom about resilience and healing that his business success had never taught him. A year later, when Daniel and Eva announced their engagement, Richard's response surprised everyone. "I couldn't have chosen better for my daughter if I had tried, which I did and failed miserably until she chose for herself." The wedding was small, held in the same park where Eva had first pushed Lily on adapted swings, where their friendship had deepened into love that encompassed all three of them. Richard walked Eva down the garden path, whispering an apology that carried genuine recognition. "I was wrong about what makes someone worthy of my daughter. Thank you for being brave enough to choose love over my approval." So wait, if this touching story moved you, subscribe to our Heart Stories for more emotional tales of family, healing, and the second chances that transform ordinary moments into extraordinary bonds.